Welcome everyone and good afternoon. My name is Melanie Woodin and it's my privilege to serve as the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Science at the University of Toronto. I am delighted to welcome the Honourable Chrystia Freeland, Canada's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance to U of T. Minister Freeland is also the Member of Parliament for University Rosedale. Minister Freeland has a long and distinguished history of public service, leading some of the most demanding portfolios in the federal government. She is a champion of democracy, human rights, multilateralism around the world, and, not least, education, which brings us here today. We are delighted to be hosting you at the Acceleration Consortium, which is truly at the vanguard of materials science and an exemplar of the university's mission of excellence in teaching and research. Using a combination of artificial intelligence and robotics, we are discovering new materials and molecules that are designed to address urgent needs in the area of medical treatments, renewable energies, and biodegradable materials, just to name a few examples. Development of such disruptive technologies is made possible by the federal government's visionary investment of $200 million in the Acceleration Consortium through the Canada First Research Excellence Fund. This grant enables, for instance, the Acceleration Consortium to provide seed funding to University of Toronto researchers to advance cutting-edge science that is powered by these robotic self-driving labs. This includes work led by Dr. Liao Chu, who is using self-driving lab technology to find the right combination of folded DNA and peptoids to treat intractable brain disease. The federal government's investment in Canada's research ecosystem and the trainees who are the lifeblood of this ecosystem recognizes the critical role of this sector in the productivity and flourishing of our country. The budget Minister Freeland tabled on behalf of the government earlier this week speaks to these essential roles that universities and advanced research play in driving Canada's economic growth and global competitiveness. The funding the government is proposing answers calls from the Naylor Report and the Bouchard Report for reinvesting in Canada's proud tradition of excellence in the global knowledge economy. Indeed, the proposed increases to core research funding via the Tri-Council agencies and enhanced support for graduate students and postdoctoral fellows will enable groundbreaking discoveries in areas like artificial intelligence and climate, while nurturing the next generation of research talent. With continued inspired leadership at the highest levels of government, it will be exciting to see Canadian researchers develop innovations with the potential to make the world a better place and drive our prosperity. With that, I'd like to introduce one of those researchers. Professor Alán Aspuru-Guzik is a professor of chemistry and computer science here at the University of Toronto. He is also the CIFAR Artificial Intelligence Chair at the Vector Institute, the co-founder of several startup companies, and the director of the Acceleration Consortium.
Thank you, Melanie. I'm very happy to be here because this is my research lab. We just spent some time with Minister Freeland showing her the kind of research that is happening here at the University of Toronto. Okay? And I believe that the research that is happening here is made of an innovation puzzle that has 4 pieces I want to talk to you about. Okay? So to be able to do what we do at the Acceleration Consortium, many things have to come in place. For example, directed research projects. We not only need to direct general base funding, but also directed projects like the Canada First Research Excellence Fund, or CIFREF, which allows us to actually take one mission, which is the mission of making Toronto the world capital of AI for materials, the materials for the future of the benefit to society in Canada, possible, right? So you have to have directed research as one of the elements. You also have to have the best talent. That's the second element of the innovation puzzle. I'm very lucky to have been recruited to Canada by the Canada 150 Research Shares Program, which actually was one of the big pieces that convinced me to move from the United States here back in 2018 to lead this laboratory and now the Acceleration Consortium. So programs like the Canada 150 Research Shares Program or the Canada Excellent Research Shares Program allows us to bring the best scientists around the world and support our local scientists in doing excellent research. Okay? Finally, another big important piece of what you see here in this room, where we were able to discover the brightest molecule in the world, the brightest organic laser in the world, is AI. And AI was a big element to draw me from the United States to Canada, because at the time Canada had just invested and now reinvested in the Vector Institute, Mila and AMI, as part of the Pan-Canadian AI strategy. So I was not only more delighted to hear that just very recently Canada doubled down and is investing in AI resources, especially compute, to keep us at the top of AI. So what is the missing fourth piece? That missing fourth piece is, as was mentioned before, fundamental science, and even more importantly, the actual remuneration of our students and postdocs. So just recently, in an event publicly, where NVIDIA was visiting here, I actually made that remarks, and I addressed directly Minister Champagne, and I said, this is the missing piece that is needed, and I didn't know that this was happening on the fly, right? And a few weeks later, now we have that missing piece, thanks to Minister Freeland and many people in the government. So I just want to end by saying that obviously this has to be paid from something, and this is actually paid by our taxes. I have to say that I personally am very happy to pay more taxes, because R&D spending actually increases the return on investment in the government by at least a factor of 4, according to the numbers I know. So it is good business to invest in science. It's good business to invest in talent, so that Canada remains at the forefront of world innovation in this competitive world. And with that, I want to bring my remarks to a close and call up Professor Frédéric Bouchard, who is the chair of the advisory panel on the Federal Research Support System and dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at the Université de Montréal, to say a very few words. So, Professor Bouchard, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alán. Deputy Prime Minister, it's a pleasure to be with you today. We're here because of a simple equation. Countries that invest in their research enterprise thrive, while those that do not falter. We know that our well-being is supported by science and research. We know that our economy grows if there is more innovation. And we know that our communities need a predictable access to talent and experts. Simple, isn't it? Well, yes and no. Canadian scientists are highly regarded globally. Canadian science has been punching above its weight for years. But the problem is that other countries have been investing massively and rethinking their research environment in order to turbocharge their research enterprise. We're talking about, of course, about US and China, but also the UK, France, Germany, South Korea, and many others. And in this new scientific world, Canada had to step up. Put simply, there is a global race for talent, and we were at risk for brain drain. There is a chase for the best ideas, and we need a way to create them here and leverage them here. Thankfully, the Government of Canada was aware of that challenge. In 2022, Minister François-Philippe Champagne and Ministre Duclos, respectively of Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, and then Minister of Health, launched the advisory panel on the Federal Research Support System. And through our report, my colleagues and I provided a suite of ambitious, what we think bold, yet feasible recommendations. And so this week, we were very happy to see that many of the recommendations of the report were implemented or announced in this year's budget. Just to name a few of those recommendations that are reflected in the budget, most importantly, improved support for graduate students to help stop the brain drain, reinvestments in the research funding agencies to increase research output, the creation of a new capstone organization to support novel interdisciplinary research, mission-driven research, international collaboration, but more generally to better support partnerships and innovation. The creation of an advisory council on science and innovation to chart a national science strategy, funding to world-class research facilities, and many other measures. Quand on travaille dans une université, on a mentionné que je suis professeur et doyen de la Faculté des arts et des sciences à l'Université de Montréal. Sur n'importe quel campus, c'est très facile d'être optimiste parce que, en fait, dans chaque laboratoire, dans chaque thèse de doctorat, dans chaque allée de bibliothèque, on voit qu'on a toutes les solutions pour construire l'avenir plutôt que le subir. Je suis donc ravi de voir que plusieurs de nos recommandations se retrouvent dans le budget et, Madame Freeland, je vous assure que la communauté de la recherche est volontaire pour contribuer à la mise en œuvre. Let me end with a wish. Let's find a way to make the greater pursuit of knowledge a national ambition, right? Part of the national identity. Let's try to find a way to make Nobel Prizes and inventors as important as Stanley Cup and hockey players. The way the Habs are going, Nobel Prizes are more likely anyway, so it's a good strategy to have. Research is the best investment to ensure that we have a better future, so we thank the government for making these investments and therefore supporting all of societal goals. Thank you, and now to you, Deputy Minister Freeland. Deputy Prime Minister Freeland.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Let me start by acknowledging that we're gathered on the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. I am so glad to be home in Toronto today in my own riding of University Rosedale. It was just great to meet some of the brilliant minds working here at the U of T's Acceleration Consortium. Alán, thank you very much for hosting us and giving us just a little bit of a flavor of the truly groundbreaking work that you and your team do right here. To all of the young researchers who are here with us today, you are totally inspiring. You are definitely the Wayne Gretzkys of today and tomorrow, and we should be celebrating you as such. You're changing the world, and I am really grateful to you for your work. I want to say a special thank you to the students, the graduate students, and the professors of the university that my riding is named after, U of T. As your constituency MP, I have been hearing from you directly about the work you do, the needs you have, and the ways in which more support can help you to help Canada even more. So I do want to say a special thank you to U of T. And really above all, I do want to recognize Frédéric Bouchard, who is here with us, who we just heard from. He chaired the advisory panel on the Federal Research Support System. He and I had a very valuable meeting in Montreal as we were preparing the budget. And I do want to say to you, Frédéric, your work really formed the basis of many of the budget measures that I'm about to be talking about. Nous allons atteindre un moment charnière pour les milléniaux et la génération Z. Ces jeunes Canadiennes et Canadiens sont remplis de talent et de potentiel. Mais aujourd'hui, un grand nombre de jeunes Canadiennes et Canadiens ont l'impression d'être au pied du mur. Ils peuvent obtenir un bon emploi et travailler fort, mais trop souvent, la récompense demeure hors de portée. That's why we are acting today to ensure fairness for every generation. We are moving with purpose to help build more homes faster. We're making life cost less, and we're driving the kind of economic growth that will ensure every generation of Canadians can reach their full potential. Our country works best when our economy is growing and when more opportunities exist for every generation. To drive the kind of growth that will deliver prosperity for Canadians, the budget I tabled on Tuesday redoubles our efforts to increase investments, enhance productivity, and encourage game-changing innovation that will create well-paying, meaningful jobs and keep Canada at the global economic vanguard. We're backing groundbreaking industries so Canada remains on the cutting edge of the technologies of tomorrow and the good jobs they will bring. We're working to empower more of our best researchers, entrepreneurs, and innovators to put their ideas to work here in Canada. So how are we doing that? Well, we're investing $5 billion in Canadian brainpower. More funding for research and scholarships will help Canada attract the next generation of game-changing thinkers doing exactly the kind of work that the brilliant people do here at the Acceleration Consortium, like artificial intelligence-driven research and innovation. And I'm really glad our government was able to support this consortium with that work a year ago with a $200 million grant. That is the largest federal research grant ever awarded to a Canadian university from the Canada First Research Excellence Fund. Bravo, Alán. That's why, as part of this $5 billion investment, we are investing $825 million over 5 years to increase the annual value of postgraduate scholarships and fellowships. This investment is going to increase the number of research scholarships and fellowships provided, and it's going to help 1,720 more graduate students and fellows each year. You've just heard from Alán what he told me as we were walking through his lab. He said that the missing piece in Canada's research puzzle was support for researchers. We heard him before today, but we heard him, we heard those views through Frédéric's report, through many, many conversations we had, including conversations with the young researchers themselves. And I am so glad we have the resources to do this now. With this budget, we're providing $1.8 billion over 5 years to support core research grants through federal granting councils like the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. This funding is going to help federal granting councils build on their excellent work to support researchers making groundbreaking discoveries in areas like artificial intelligence, health, and climate change, just like the brilliant people working here at the Acceleration Consortium are doing. I really want to thank Alán for his inspiring tour. I so support his ambition. He said at one point as we were walking around, you know what, I'm not going to be humble. We are the best in the world at what we do here. And I love that. Modesty is a Canadian virtue, but let's make ambition a Canadian virtue too. And this investment is about providing the resources so Canada can be a leader. His work also exemplifies something that I believe in so strongly that Frédéric also underscored. And that is that making investments in research, making investments in our young researchers is an investment in economic growth and productivity. And Alán himself is an example of that. He is here a brilliant researcher leading this lab. He's also an entrepreneur. That's why he really had some extra vim when he talked about paying a little more in order to support the kinds of investments we are making today. And not just the kinds of investments, in order to support these specific investments. It really is a virtuous circle. Investing in research, investing in scientists, investing in master's degree students, doctoral students, postdocs. Sure, that is investing in our scientists. It's also investing in our entrepreneurs and innovators. And some of Canada's leading entrepreneurs and innovators started their journey in a lab like this one. Many of them are entrepreneurs and researchers at the same time. And that is one of the reasons that this investment is so important. Nous investissons également près de 735 millions de dollars dans des infrastructures de recherche de pointe, c'est-à-dire des laboratoires et des installations modernes de haute qualité. C'est dans ces laboratoires et ces centres de recherche qui naissent les percées scientifiques qui aident à résoudre des problèmes concrets, qui aident à créer les débouchés économiques de l'avenir. En veillant à ce que le Canada dispose d'installations de recherche de pointe, nous pourrons attirer et former la prochaine génération de scientifiques de talent. And we are building on our track record of making it more affordable to go to college and university by extending the increase in upfront Canada student grants and interest-free loans, increasing the amount of financial aid students get for housing, and making it easier for mature students to go back to school affordably. All of this is on top of our campaign promise to eliminate interest on Canada's student loans. We delivered on that a year ago. A prosperous future and abundant, good-paying jobs depend on Canada's researchers, innovators, and entrepreneurs, who are often the very same person. That is why we are supporting them. That's why we are supporting you. We're building on forward-looking investments this government has made, and we're doing even more because we know that this is an essential part of Canada's economic future. We're acting now and acting with purpose, because the cost of inaction today would be borne chiefly by younger Canadians. We would be leaving them behind, and we cannot. We simply will not do that. Instead, we will help them realize the promise of Canada with a responsible plan that creates new career opportunities and grows the economy for every generation. There are some, like the Conservative leader, who don't share our vision. He has already said he won't support this budget. That means he doesn't support researchers and the incredibly important work that you do. He doesn't support making Canada's tax system more fair and making sure that the wealthiest pay their fair share. Because, ultimately, he believes that the job of government is to do little, then less, and ultimately as close as possible to nothing at all. Let's be honest about what austerity and shrinking the state would mean for Canadians. It means you're on your own. It means no one will give you a hand when you falter, and that you are choosing to turn your back on the friend or neighbor who has not been as lucky as you. That's not the Canadian way. We take care of each other. Today, we're saying to our younger generations and to those who care about them, we're putting the power of government to work for you. Together, we'll unlock the door to the middle class for more Canadians and renew the promise of our great country. And now we are going to hear from one of those young Canadians, Kaitlin Kharas. She's a U of T doctoral student, a U of T PhD student, and I'm looking forward to hearing from her. She seems to be a little taller than me, but that's true of pretty much everybody.
Well, thank you, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. I'm the Executive Director of Support Our Science, which is a grassroots movement advocating for the 300,000 graduate students and postdoctoral scholars in Canada. Over the past several years, thousands of Canadians have come together from coast to coast to make their voices heard and advocate for the importance of investing in next-generation researchers. Support Our Science is thrilled with Budget 2024's significant new investments for graduate students and postdoctoral scholars. These talented individuals drive much of Canada's research, discovery, and innovation. By increasing both the number and value of federally funded awards, as well as investing in the faculty grants through which most graduate students and postdoctoral scholars are paid, Budget 2024 will enable these essential researchers to better meet their financial needs. This enhanced support will ensure the next generation of Canadian scientists, innovators, and entrepreneurs can focus on their research and the essential work of creating solutions to Canada's largest problems. Importantly, it will also make the Canadian scientific ecosystem more diverse and inclusive by reducing the financial barriers to pursuing research training. Support Our Science sincerely thanks the graduate students and postdoctoral scholars who volunteered their time and shared their stories, as well as the professors, staff, and members of the public who advocated with us on this important issue. We also thank the many policymakers from all parties who sponsored petitions, worked on the Science and Research Committee, and advocated for students to the government. And of course, we are grateful to you, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland, along with Prime Minister Trudeau, and your colleagues Minister Champagne and Minister Holland, for hearing us and taking decisive action. We look forward to continuing to work with government decision makers to strengthen Canada's research ecosystem and to ensure our country is a leader in developing and attracting talent. But make no mistake, by ensuring graduate students and postdoctoral scholars are supported, Budget 2024 has ushered in a new era of Canadian research excellence. Thank you, and I'd now like to introduce Dr. Chad Gaffield, CEO and Executive Director of U15 Canada.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a lot of hard work. You guys really did a great job.
Merci beaucoup, Kaitlin, et bonjour à tous et toutes. C'est un grand privilège d'être ici à l'Université de Toronto, and it's so wonderful to be shoulder to shoulder with our Deputy Prime Minister, Dr. Bouchard, and so many students, colleagues, and researchers from around Canada at one of the world's great universities here at the University of Toronto. As the association representing leading research universities across the country, U15 Canada welcomes the major investment in research announced in Budget 2024. By increasing both research grants and scholarship and fellowship awards, as well as support for major research facilities, this broad and deep funding is an investment in the future success of Canada. By increasing support for research to advance knowledge and develop highly qualified talent, Budget 2024 will significantly help Canada navigate an increasingly turbulent and competitive world. As Canadians, we can be proud of the successful research ecosystem built since the late 1990s to empower academic creativity and invest in promising ideas. This winning strategy has delivered benefits for all Canadians and underpinned Canada's success thus far in coming to grips with the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century. Budget 2024 builds on this strategy, recognizing the critical role of research in developing the talented people and advancing knowledge to enable initiatives to build prosperous, sustainable, and resilient, just societies. Rather than fearing brain drain, Canada will be able to retain and attract promising students, researchers, and partners to confront the challenges and seize the opportunities of this changing world. Increased support for science and research will make Canada more competitive on the international stage and will help us build a stronger and more resilient economy and society here at home. In closing, I want to emphasize that today's announcement responds to the shoulder-to-shoulder advocacy from the research community through the Coalition for Canadian Research and the clear vision for success articulated in the Bouchard report. Many thanks to all those who contributed to this work for the benefit of Canada's future. We are so pleased that the federal government has demonstrated their profound belief in the endless possibilities of science and research. I know the emerging generation and established researchers will step up to deliver truly transformative results for today, tomorrow, and for years to come to help make a better future for Canada and the world. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Wasiimah Joomunl, the Executive Director for the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations.
You can have my step. Yeah, why don't you use my step? We're sort of, it's one benefit of doing this.
Amazing.
You'll be able to see.
Amazing. Perfect. Good afternoon, and thank you to my colleagues, the grad students, for being present with us today, but also for all the work they've put behind the scene. It is great to be here at the University of Toronto, the home of Banting and McLeod, Innes and McLaughlin, Benson and Baker, and so many other great researchers and thinkers. My name is Wasiimah, and I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations. Avec notre partenaire à l'Union étudiante de Québec, CASA représente plus que 365 000 étudiants et étudiantes à travers le pays. Research is how we solve problems, and today CASA is pleased to see the government's investment in talent across the country. When CASA appeared before the Standing Committee on Science and Research, we shared how tightly woven our present extraordinary Canadian graduate students are with the future of Canada. These are our future leaders, scientists, private sector entrepreneurs, and innovators. We want to thank the committee for its multipartisan recognition of the important role graduate students play in the research ecosystem. We also want to thank the government and the Minister of Finance for committing to investing in Canada's problem solvers by increasing not just the number of eligible recipients, but ensuring those roles pay more livable wages. When these new investments begin, not only will Canada have more graduate students able to pursue independent and critical research, but they will be able to do so without having to take several part-time jobs to put the food on their table for them or their children. When paired with increase in funding to the Tri-Council agencies to fund professors running world-class labs that employ graduate students, it makes me and many graduate students feel more secure about Canada's talent pipeline. I cannot wait to see what problems our student researchers will tackle. Students across the country are celebrating this investment after more than 20 years, and we look forward to continuing working with the government in ensuring that talent and research remain in Canada. Thank you, and I will now pass it on to Gabriel Miller, President and CEO of Universities Canada, to close us off.
All right, we're in the home stretch. Je voudrais commencer par remercier la ministre Freeland et Frédéric Bouchard. Without their work, we wouldn't be here today. And I also want to thank my colleagues who've advocated so hard and for so long for these investments, Chad, Kaitlin, and Wasiimah. And finally, I want to thank Alán, Dean Woodin, and the University of Toronto Chemistry Department for welcoming us here today. You know, here we are standing in a cutting-edge laboratory at a world-class university, but today's announcement, like all the best announcements, is really fundamentally about people. It's about the brilliant, hardworking graduate students that today's announcement will help pay their rent and stay in Canada. It's about the family down the street that's praying for a life-saving medical treatment. And it's about the millions of Canadians who will benefit from new jobs and businesses created by research investments. Budget 2024 and its investments in research will create opportunity and improve the lives of Canadians. That's worth celebrating. Merci beaucoup.
Okay.
Q&A portion. It's one question, one follow-up. Please just state your name and your outlet. There should be a microphone just there for journalists interested. Passons maintenant à faire des questions. Ce sera une question suivie. Veuillez noter votre nom et votre média. Il y a un micro juste là pour les gens intéressés. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A question for Minister Freeland. And it's Irene Gallio with the Globe and Mail.
Can I just ask you to speak up?
Yes.
Because there's lots of work being done around us.
Of course. Empirical evidence suggests that raising capital gains taxes reduces venture capital funding and the creation of innovative companies. I'd like to cite a literature review by Simon Fraser University economist Jonathan Kesselman from just last year, which concluded, and I quote, "Theoretical economic analysis confirms the adverse effects of higher capital gains taxes on the creation and success of startup enterprises, and empirical and quantitative analysis confirms that." Given this, how and with what evidence can you justify raising capital gains taxes at a time when low productivity and weak business investment has been called a national emergency by the senior deputy governor of the Bank of Canada?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. And I want to start by talking about what the purpose of our budget is, what we're working hard to accomplish. And that really is what we've heard the people here with me talking about, which is unlocking the promise of Canada for everyone, but especially for young Canadians. I was especially glad to have the students and people who speak for students here with us because they talked about how young Canadians need more support. And we agree with that. And that's why this budget is investing in Canada. It's investing in the middle class. And above all, it is investing in unlocking the promise of the middle class for young Canadians. And we're doing that with investments in housing, so essential, with investments in affordability, with investments in economic growth and productivity. That's what we're driving for. I want to talk now for a minute about the investments that we are making in the Canadian economy, in Canadian growth and productivity. I'm going to start with the one that we're here talking about, and that is a massive generational $5 billion investment in Canadian brains. That is an investment in people, as we've just heard Chad say, and it is an investment in our economy. The people working at this lab, the master's degree students, the PhD students, the postdocs who are going to get support from the investment in this budget, they are going to discover incredible things that are going to make our lives better. And you know what? A lot of them are going to found companies that drive Canadian growth and productivity, and we celebrate them for doing that. This budget also is a historic investment in AI, $2.4 billion. We've heard from Alán how important Canada's AI advantage is broadly. You know, it's important here for chemists. It's important across the economy. And, you know, in AI, computers and computer technology arguably was the transformative technology of the second half of the 20th century. A person can make the argument that AI will have a similar impact in the 21st century. Canada has the capacity, we have all the resources to own the podium in that space, to not be a branch plant economy in AI. And I am determined that we should do that, but it costs money. And that's where the $2.4 billion investment comes in and is so valuable. The budget also includes more money going into the SHRED program. This is our kind of, you know, the Canadian government's workhorse when it comes to research and development. We're doing a consultation to sort of bring it up to speed for the 21st century. And in the budget, we had the fiscal space to add some more money into that program. We also, in the budget, announced a targeted productivity enhancing ACCA investment. That's Accelerated Capital Cost Allowance, and that will create incentives, make it easier for businesses to invest in productivity enhancing technologies. So there's so much in the budget directly for productivity and growth. And then I want to point to three things that are foundational for that. The first one is housing. We heard one of the graduate students talk about the challenge of housing, and our investment in housing is because people need it. It is also an economically essential investment. Housing is a choke point in people's lives right now. It's a choke point in economic growth, and we need to invest in it, and we are absolutely energetically and aggressively. Investing in the middle class and in good lives for middle class Canadians, especially for young Canadians, that's an investment in the economy too. A country cannot be economically successful. Businesses cannot be successful. Entrepreneurs cannot be successful in a society that doesn't work, in a society where the middle class dream is not a reality for hardworking young Canadians. So that's an investment in productivity as well. And then the final productivity and growth point I want to make is fiscal responsibility. This budget did a big thing, which is we made really significant investments in Canada and in Canadians, generational ones, like the one we're talking about specifically here today. And we did it while hitting the three very specific fiscal anchors that we outlined in the fall. That is a big deal. That is allowing Canada to remain the G7 country with the lowest debt to GDP ratio, the lowest deficit to GDP ratio, and it is directly connected to economic growth. Our very strong fiscal position provides essential certainty for Canadian businesses. It is an investment in creating the economic conditions that will allow inflation to stabilize and will allow the Bank of Canada to bring down rates. So essential for all business people in the country. So this is a budget that by investing in Canadians, by investing directly in growth in the economy, is an investment specifically in the economy. Now, I know it's a long answer, but it's a big question. If you'll permit me, I'll just say a couple of things very specifically on capital gains. I think it's important to start by pointing out to all Canadians that the principal residence total exemption on capital gains remains. Every Canadian's home remains totally free from any capital gains tax. I think the second thing important to point out is the new rate kicks in only after the first $250,000. For a couple, that's $500,000 before there is any change. And then a couple of things that maybe are a little bit less, well known at this point. We've increased the lifetime capital gains allowance from $1 million to $1.25 million. And we've created something entirely new in Canada, which is the Canadian Entrepreneurs Incentive. And that's $2 million, which is going to be taxed actually at a lower rate than capital gains are currently taxed. So for the first $3.5 million of capital gains, entrepreneurs actually will be taxed at a lower rate than they are today. And up to $6.25 million, at $6.25 million, that's the break-even rate compared to today. Because, I want to support the postdocs who are here, the researchers. I also want to support them to do what Alán has been doing, and I want them to set up their own companies and feel that there is support from the country and a real incentive there. And I'll just say three final things. I think it's important for Canadians to recognize that the rate that we've established is actually lower than the one that Prime Minister Brian Mulroney had set. The rate that and that was without a $250,000 tier. The rate that we have set means capital gains will, again, without the $250,000 tier, be taxed at a lower rate than they are in California or in New York City. And, you know, I really do want to say we believe in this budget. We really believe in the investments this budget is making, in the investments in housing, in the investments in affordability, in the investments in growth and productivity, like $5 billion for Canadian brains. These are investments about unlocking the promise of Canada for all Canadians, especially millennials and Gen Z. And it was important for us to make those investments in a fiscally responsible way because I want inflation to stabilize. I want the Bank of Canada to be in a position where it can bring interest rates down. And I want businesses and all Canadians to have the certainty that comes from a fiscally responsible path. I want young Canadians to know that I am making these investments today and I'm not just building up lots of debt that they're going to have to pay off. I am making them in the most responsible way of any G7 country. Now, that does mean, as Alán said, that we're asking those who are doing the very best, those who are working so hard and doing great things, you know, as Alán, our scientist and entrepreneur, is doing. People who are enriching our country with their work and are doing really well. We're asking those people to contribute a little bit more so that we can make the investments that Canadians need. That's what we're doing. It's the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have a follow-up. I might ask you to share specifically what evidence your team looked at when you were creating these policies. And further to that, you've said that these capital gains taxes will bring us to a level equivalent with California and New York. And that is true, they do. But those are the leading global hubs for entrepreneurship and startup funding. And most Canadian innovators will tell you that Canada isn't quite there yet. So how does it make sense to have the same tax rate as California, for instance, when we're trying to grow startup and VC programs? And looking at an incentive program like patent boxes, for instance, that other jurisdictions typically adopt to be competitive.
Okay, lots of things in there, but I will just say, I'll actually start where you concluded. You know, specifically on patent boxes, that is something that we are looking at as part of our SHRED review. And I absolutely believe that we need to continue to look at ways to make Canada more productive, to drive growth in Canada, and also specifically to support Canadian entrepreneurs and innovators. $5 billion invested in research is a very, very significant and important investment. I'm not going to go through all the academic research, but I will note that Trevor Tombe published an interesting blog about this, and he's an economist who's written about this a lot. Kevin Milligan has as well. Michael Smart here at the University of Toronto is another really important resource. And Reese Kesselman, who you cite, is in fact an advocate of the buck is a buck is a buck approach to the treatment of capital gains. I do, though, want to bring us all back to what is our purpose. And at the end of the day, I really believe that as a country, we need to make investments in housing. I think it's absolutely essential. And actually, I haven't met a Canadian who disagrees. I think we absolutely need to make investments in affordability. which includes investments in a social safety net, which is much better than the social safety net in the United States. And that's something Canadians, I think, should justly be proud of. It costs money. And I think it is important for us to make some very specific, targeted investments in productivity, like $5 billion in Canadian brains, like $2.4 billion in AI, like the expansion of the SHRED program, which includes Patent Box, like our investment in ACCA. And we're doing it because that is how you support middle-class Canadians. That is how you unlock the dream of the middle class, especially for the young Canadians for whom it has become out of reach. And I just, as I said in my budget speech, I believe so profoundly that we are at a critical moment in Canada. I think we're at a critical moment in all Western capitalist democracies. And the social contract of capitalist democracy is you have to deliver for the middle class. I really believe in capitalist democracy. I've lived in other systems, actually, and they're pretty awful. It is so important right now that we work hard to ensure our democracy is delivering for the middle class, is delivering for middle class Canadians. I don't think you can do that just by putting more and more debt on Canada's credit card. I think that that actually would hurt our economy today. It would hurt our investment climate. And I think it's really unfair to young Canadians who are already struggling with generational equity. And so I think it's absolutely right to ask those who we celebrate, who are doing well in our society, who are contributing by doing well in our society, and to say, you are driving Canadian prosperity and you're benefiting from the fact, you're benefiting from what the whole society does. And so we're going to ask you to contribute a little bit more so that we can afford these absolutely essential investments. And, there are a lot of people in Canada, great researcher entrepreneurs like Alán, who's with me, who recognize that we need to do that. And certainly, I spent a lot of time talking to graduate students, university students. I've met with them in my writing office that's just up the road. And I'm really, really glad that we are able to make all the investments in the budget, and I'm going to say because of today, particularly the $5 billion in Canadian brains. That's the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to ask those who are doing best in our society to contribute a little bit more so we can make these essential investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next question, prochaine question.
Enzo from Global News.
Okay, you are a very productive Canadian because you're asking questions and also operating the camera.
Yes, for Global Vancouver. The question is, we're hearing from some of the critics in the Vancouver area after the budget who are saying the disability benefit of $200 a month isn't enough to lift people out of poverty. How do you come up with the amount, and how do you respond?
Yeah, I think I got most of the question. There's a lot of noise, but I think I got it. Thank you for the question. And I personally, and we as a government, absolutely recognize the challenges that people with a disability face in Canada today. And that's why we were so glad that as part of this budget, which invests so energetically in Canada and Canadians, we were able to make a historic investment in Canadians living with a disability. We have done more than any federal government in Canadian history, and I'm glad that we've been able to do that. And I do want to pay a personal tribute to my friend and colleague, Carla Qualtrough, who personally championed this. It's the right thing to do. I'm glad that we're doing it. It's going to be very important for all of us to be very clear with provinces and territories that it is not going to be acceptable for them to claw back benefits that people living with a disability are currently receiving. The federal benefit is there to support people with a disability more, not to substitute for money from provinces. I agree with your question that it would be great to be able to do more, and we aspire to that. This is a big step, and better is always possible in Canada, and we need to keep working hard.
Follow-up question? Okay, that concludes today's press conference.
Okay.
Conférence de presse.
Thank you very much.